Hello, friends. We are interested in the geography of our views, so please like and write in the comments from which city are you watching us, and were there loud stories of betrayal in your city? Share your stories with us. Maybe the next betrayal story will be from your city, and we start. The silence in the house was thick, almost tangible, like the dust that settles on old furniture. Alex sat in the living room, leaning back on the couch, staring at the TV, which was droning something in the background, another news report, or maybe a commercial for a cleaning product. He didn't listen. The remote control lay on the armrest, his fingers lazily touching the buttons but not pressing. Outside the window, the evening was slowly fading. The April light was melting, leaving behind a gray haze that seeped through the curtains. Time passed slowly, as always on such evenings when he was alone. The clock was ticking in the kitchen, an old mechanical monster that Lauren had insisted on keeping, even though he had long suggested replacing it with something modern. "They have soul," she said one day, smiling that soft smile of hers that made something warm inside him. Then it seemed like a trifle, a sweet whim. Now every tick-tock sounded like a reminder. She was not here. Again. "I'll be staying at Kate's," she said in the morning, getting ready for work. The voice was smooth, casual, as if she was saying that she would buy milk on the way home. "She has some kind of crisis with her boyfriend. We need to talk." Alex nodded, not looking up from the coffee he was stirring in a mug with the faded logo of the local baseball team. "Uh-huh," he muttered, and she left, leaving behind a trail of floral perfume and the light click of her heels on the parquet. It didn't seem strange at the time. Kate, her friend from college, always got into some kind of drama, either with men or with money. Lauren has always been the one who listens, consoles, lends a shoulder. This was her role, her nature. Or so he used to think. But now, sitting in this silence, he suddenly realized that her delays had become more frequent. Once a week, then twice, now almost every third evening. And it's always the same: Kate, friend, conversations. He never asked for details. He didn't want to seem intrusive, and he didn't see the point. Lauren had been his wife for 7 years. 7 years of stability, routine, habits. Without children, they both decided to wait until everything had settled down, although he himself no longer knew what exactly was supposed to settle down. Work, home, dinners together on weekends. Everything was as smooth as the asphalt on the driveway he had laid himself 2 years ago. And yet, something in this evenness began to crack. He got up, walked into the kitchen, and opened the refrigerator. The shelves were half full. A couple of yogurts, leftover pizza from yesterday, a bottle of beer he'd bought last week but never drank. He took the beer, turned it over in his hands, and put it back. I didn't want to. Instead, he poured water into a glass and froze, looking at his reflection in the glass cabinet door. Broad shoulders, a slightly hunched back, the result of 8 hours behind the wheel of a truck every day. His face is rough, with light stubble, which he did not have time to shave in the morning. The eyes are tired, but tenacious. He was 38 and looked his age, not older, but not younger either. A man who is used to keeping everything under control: car, house, life. And yet control was slipping away. He felt it a couple of weeks ago when Lauren came home later than usual, with a slight blush on her cheeks and a smile that was too quick. "Kate's completely unraveled," she said, kicking off her shoes and going into the shower, not looking him in the eye. Then he ignored it. But now, in this silence, the words, "I'll stay with Kate," sounded different, like the squeal of brakes on an empty road, sharp, alarming. He returned to the living room, sat down, but immediately stood up again. His legs carried him to the table in the hallway where Lauren usually left her things. Her bag was their black leather with a frayed corner that she kept meaning to sew up. There was a telephone nearby. She forgot it in the morning while running to work. Alex never touched her phone. There was no reason. He trusted her. Always trusted. But today the silence was more pressing than usual, and something inside him, not curiosity, but rather instinct, pushed him forward. He picked up the phone. The screen was dark, but as soon as the button was pressed, it came to life. There was no password. Lauren never set one. She said that she had nothing to hide. Alex froze, feeling his heart beating a little faster. This was wrong. He knew it was wrong. But my fingers were already sliding across the screen, opening messages. The list of chats was long. Her colleagues, her sister, a couple of friends. And Kate, of course. He opened their correspondence, expecting to see something about a crisis with his boyfriend. But the last messages were short, nothing specific. Meet me at 6. Where are you? Nothing unusual. He exhaled, almost in relief, but his gaze caught the name below. Mark. Who is Mark? He opened the chat, and his stomach dropped. There were a lot of messages, dozens, hundreds, stretched out over weeks. The last one was from this morning. I'm waiting for you today. Don't be late like last time. The smiley at the end cut like a shard of glass. Alex scrolled up. You are amazing. When will we see you again? Yesterday was unforgettable. Every word fell into him like a stone into an empty well, echoing. Lauren answered, short but warm. Soon, I miss you too. You know how much I need this. He placed the phone back on the table, carefully, as if it were a bomb ready to explode. His hands were shaking, but he clenched them into fists, forcing himself to breathe evenly. There was only one question in my head. Who is Mark? He didn't know anyone with that name. Not a colleague, not a neighbor, not a casual acquaintance from their common circles. And why did she never mention him? Alex returned to the sofa, but now the silence seemed different, not cozy, but hostile. He remembered their life, building it before his eyes, like a route map. They got married at 31. He had just gotten a stable job at a transport company, and she was finishing an interior design course. The wedding was modest, a couple of dozen guests, a small restaurant in the suburbs, toasts about a long and happy life. The first years were good, not ideal, but warm. They bought this house, old but sturdy, with worn hardwood floors and a large backyard. He fixed the roof and painted the walls himself, while Lauren picked up the curtains and arranged the pillows on the sofa. They laughed, argued, and made peace. Everything was simple. But somewhere along the way something faded. He couldn't say exactly when. Maybe when she gave up design and got a job in an office where she spent all day answering calls and typing reports. Maybe when he started taking more shifts to pay off the mortgage and came home too tired to talk about anything other than bills. They didn't quarrel, there were no loud scandals, slamming doors, or broken dishes. The distance between them simply grew, slowly, imperceptibly, like a crack in the asphalt that you don't notice until you trip. He looked at her empty place on the sofa, the pillow that she always put under her back, the blanket that she liked to throw on her lap. Everything was in place, but she was not there, and now he knew why. The door slammed an hour later. Lauren came in, taking off her coat, her hair slightly disheveled, her cheeks pink from the evening air. She looked alive, bright, not the way he was used to seeing her at home. Hi, she said, throwing her bag on the table. Have you eaten? I can heat up the pizza. He looked at her without answering. Her voice was light, familiar, but now there was something alien in it. She walked into the kitchen without noticing his gaze and opened the refrigerator. Alex stood up, slowly, as if every step required effort. How's Kate? He asked. His voice was low, calm, but there was a ring of steel in it. Lauren froze for a second, then turned around with a smile. Oh, as usual. Quarrel, tears, wine. I barely persuaded her not to call him in the middle of the night. She spoke quickly, too quickly. Alex nodded, leaning against the door frame. His eyes never left hers, and for the first time that evening he noticed her look away. Okay, he said quietly. Glad you helped her. Lauren smiled again, but it was forced. She turned away, taking out a plate, and he stood and watched her move around the kitchen confidently, habitually, but now not in the same way as before. Something's broken. Not in the house, not in them, in himself. And he knew that this was just the beginning. The next morning started as usual. The alarm clock vibrated on the nightstand at 5:30. Alex reached over, turned it off, and sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing his face. Lauren was still asleep, buried in her pillow, her blonde hair scattered across the sheet. He looked at her for a couple of seconds at the familiar curve of her neck, at her slightly parted lips, from which even breathing escaped. She looked calm, serene, as if nothing had changed. But for him, everything was already different. He got up, went to the bathroom, and washed his face with cold water. The mirror reflected his face, dark circles under his eyes, a tense crease between his eyebrows. He stayed up most of the night, replaying messages from Mark in his head. Each word was etched into my memory like scars on a tree, deep, rough, and cannot be erased. You're amazing. Yesterday was unforgettable. He clenched his fists, feeling his nails dig into his palms, but the pain didn't help. She only ignited something inside, not rage, not yet, but a cold, heavy feeling that he could not name. Lauren woke up when he was already in the kitchen, making coffee. She walked in, wrapped in a robe, with a slight smile, as if last night was just another normal day. "Good morning," she said, reaching into the closet for her mug white, with the inscription, "Best wife ever," a gift from him for their anniversary. Irony struck him in the chest, but he remained silent. "Aha," he replied, stirring his cup with a spoon. Metal clinked against ceramic, the sound echoing in the silence. "Are you okay?" she asked, throwing a quick glance at him. "You look tired." "It was a long night," he said without looking up. "I thought a lot." She nodded, as if that explained everything, and began talking about something else, about work, about buying a new filter for the coffee maker. Her voice was in the background, like the radio in the cab of his truck. He listened with half an ear, nodding in the right places, but his thoughts were somewhere far away. Mark. Who is he? Where do they meet? And how long does it last? When she went into the shower, he finished his coffee, leaving a residue at the bottom of the mug, and made a decision. He won't ask. He won't make a scene. He won't spill everything he saw on her phone. It would be too easy, too fast. No, he will find out on his own. He will see with his own eyes. He needs proof not for her, but for himself, so as not to doubt anymore. The day passed slowly. He loaded the car at the warehouse, checked the route delivery to the neighboring state, round trip in 8 hours. The work was mechanical, steering wheel, pedals, an endless ribbon of highway. Usually this calmed him down, giving him time to put his thoughts in order. But today the asphalt under the wheels seemed alien, and every mile only intensified the roar in my head. He turned on the radio, but the voices of the presenters were annoying, and he turned it off after 5 minutes. Silence was better, she didn't lie. Lauren called at lunchtime, briefly, as always. "I'll be late again today," she said, and there was not a shadow of tension in her voice. "Kate wants to meet to discuss something." "Kate," he repeated, holding the phone to his ear. The word sounded heavier than he intended. "Yeah, she's still in crisis." Lauren chuckled, like it was funny. "I'll be back late. Don't wait up." "Okay," he replied. "See you." She said goodbye and hung up. Alex looked at the phone screen for a few more seconds, then put it in his pocket. Kate. He almost laughed at the absurdity of the word. But the laughter got stuck somewhere in my throat, turning into a lump. He finished his shift at 5, went home, and took a shower. Lauren was already gone. Her car wasn't in the driveway, and the house smelled of her perfume, a faint hint of her presence. He changed into jeans and a dark jacket, took the keys to his pickup truck, and walked out. The decision came naturally, without any extra thought. He will go after her. Find out the truth. It wasn't difficult to find her. She always parked at the office in the same lot, an old sedan, silver, with a scratch on the rear bumper from a failed attempt to park a couple of years ago. Alex arrived at her company building at 6, turned off the engine and waited, keeping his distance. His pickup truck was inconspicuous black, shabby, with a couple of dents from many years on the road. Nobody will pay attention. She emerged at 6:15, wearing a formal gray coat and carrying a bag over her shoulder. Her hair was pulled back into a messy bun, but she looked collected and confident. Alex watched as she got into the car, turned on the headlights, and pulled out of the parking lot. He started the engine and followed, keeping a distance of a couple of cars. My heart was beating steadily, but tension was growing in my chest, as if before a long journey in the rain. She didn't drive towards Kate's house. He knew where she lived, in the suburbs in the northeast. Instead, her car turned west into an area he rarely visited. The streets became narrower, the houses older, with peeling paint and unkempt lawns. Alex frowned, but continued driving, trying not to lose sight of her. 20 minutes later, she stopped at a small two-story house brick, with dark windows and an old pickup truck in the driveway. Not Kate's house, not Kate's home at all. Lauren got out of the car, straightened her hair, looked around a short, almost imperceptible glance around, and headed towards the door. She didn't knock. She just opened it and walked in as if it was normal. Alex watched from his pickup truck, parked across the street in the shade of an old oak tree. He turned off the engine, but his hands were still on the steering wheel, squeezing it until his knuckles turned white. He sat there for 10 minutes, maybe 15. Time passed slowly, like oil in a cold frying pan. Thoughts were spinning in his head, but he pushed them away. Maybe it's not what I think. Maybe it's just a friend. Maybe I'm wrong. But messages from Mark floated before his eyes, like evidence he couldn't deny. I'm waiting for you today. You know how much I need this. Finally, he exhaled, opened the car door, and got out. His feet felt heavy, as if someone had poured cement into his shoes, but he forced himself to walk. The street was quiet, no cars, no people, only the faint sound of the wind in the branches. He crossed the road and approached the house, keeping close to the shadows. The windows on the first floor were covered with blinds, but one on the side glowed with a soft yellow light. He stopped nearby, leaning against the wall, and looked inside through the gap between the plastic strips. At first, he saw only silhouettes, dark figures against the background of a lamp. Then the picture became clearer. Lauren stood in the middle of the room, her coat laying on the back of a chair, her hair now down. Opposite her was a man tall, with dark hair, wearing a simple t-shirt and jeans. He said something, smiling, and Lauren laughed in response quietly, but sincerely, the way she hadn't laughed at home for a long time. Alex watched as the man came closer, as his hand slid to her waist, as she did not move away. And then they kissed, not briefly, not accidentally, but deeply, greedily, like people who know each other too well. Alex froze. The world has narrowed to this window, to this scene. He saw how the man pulled her towards the sofa, how her arms wrapped around his neck, how they fell onto the pillows, laughing between kisses. Clothes began to disappear, first her blouse, then his t-shirt. It wasn't just a kiss. It was sex, rough, fast, full of the kind of passion he hadn't seen in their bedroom for years. He took out his phone and turned on the camera. His hands were shaking, but he forced himself to keep them steady. The screen recorded everything: her bare shoulders, his hands on her body, movements, sounds that he did not hear, but could imagine. He filmed for a minute, maybe two, until he felt like he couldn't watch anymore. The phone dropped into his pocket, and he moved away from the window, pressing his back against the cold brick. Something died inside him. Not love, he wasn't sure if there was any left at all. Not hope, he hadn't had that for a long time. Something deeper, something that kept him in this life with her all these years. Confidence, trust, a part of himself. He stood there in the dark, listening to the wind rustle the leaves, and knew there was no turning back. He returned to the car, sat behind the wheel, but did not start the engine. He just sat, looking at the house, at the light in the window, which now seemed alien to him. Lauren was there with him, with Mark or whatever his name was. And he was here alone, with a video on his phone and emptiness inside. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't know what to do next. Morning burst into the house with gray light seeping through the cracks in the curtains. Alex didn't sleep. He returned home around midnight after sitting in the car for another hour, looking at that house, at the light in the window, which only went out in the morning. He didn't remember how he got to the house, how he turned off the engine, how he went inside. Everything was automatic movements, breathing, steps. Only nothing moved inside. There was silence there, cold and dead, like a winter forest. He was sitting in the kitchen when the first rays of the sun touched the floor. In his hands is a mug of cold coffee, which he never raised to his lips. The phone lay on the table in front of him, face down, like a mine ready to explode. The video was there, short but long enough to ruin everything. He didn't review it. I didn't want to. Once was enough for every frame to be etched in the memory. Her laughter, her hands, someone else's body next to her. It was more real than he could bear. Lauren came downstairs at 7:30. He heard her steps on the stairs light, familiar, as if nothing had changed. She walked into the kitchen, tying the belt of her robe, her hair still damp from her shower. She looked fresh, rested, and it hit him harder than he expected. It was as if last night had left no trace on her. "Good morning," she said, opening the cabinet for her mug. Same tone, same ritual. "You got up early." He didn't answer. I just watched her as she moved around the kitchen confidently, calmly, as if it was just another ordinary day. She turned on the coffee maker, took out a bag of bread, and began whistling something under her breath. It was the tune from an old commercial they used to laugh at together. Now it sounded like a mockery. Alex stood up slowly, took the phone from the table, and placed it in front of her, screen facing up. He turned on the video before she even entered, paused it on the first frame, her silhouette in that window, with Mark behind her. The sound was off, but the picture spoke for itself. Lauren froze. Her hand with a slice of bread stopped halfway to the toaster. She looked at the phone, then at him. Her eyes darted around quick, sharp movements, like those of a hunted animal. The mouth opened slightly, but no words came. She swallowed and lowered the bread onto the table slowly, as if it might delay the inevitable. "What is this?" she finally squeezed out. Her voice was quiet, but a note of irritation was already ringing in it. "You know what it is," Alex said. His voice was smooth, low, like the sound of an idling engine. He didn't shout or raise his tone. There was no need. The truth lay between them, clear and sharp, like a knife. She stared at the video, her fingers clenching into a fist, then unclenching. Her lips trembled, but instead of answering, she straightened up, crossing her arms over her chest. Her face changed, not shock, not shame, but something cold, almost defiant. "Were you following me?" she asked, narrowing her eyes. "Seriously, Alex?" He looked at her, not believing his ears. This was not the question he was expecting. Not a sorry, not an "I'll explain," but an accusation thrown at him as if he were at fault. "I followed you," he said, without looking away, "because you lied." "Kate." Crisis. "How many times have you told me this? And yesterday I saw the truth. Here it is, on the table." Lauren pursed her lips, her cheeks slightly red, but not from embarrassment, from anger. She stepped towards the table, looked at the phone, then back at him. "And what do you want me to say?" she said, her voice becoming sharper. "What are you, a hero now? Spy? Do you even understand what this looks like?" Alex felt something tighten inside him, like a cable just before it snaps. He took a step forward, rested his hands on the table, and leaned towards her. His eyes were dark, motionless, like a lake before a storm. "I want you to explain who this guy is," he said, emphasizing every word. "Why are you having sex with him in someone else's house while I'm sitting here waiting for you? Explain this to me, Lauren." She pulled back, but not far. Her gaze became icy, almost alien. She was silent for a few seconds, then chuckled, a short, dry sound he had never heard from her before. "Do you really want to discuss this?" she said finally. "Fine. Yes, it was. And what? Do you think I should fall on my knees and beg you to forgive me? This is life, Alex. People make mistakes." "Mistakes?" He straightened up, feeling the blood pounding in his temples. "This is not a mistake. It's a choice. You chose him every time you told me about Kate. Every time I leave this house. This isn't a one-time mistake, Lauren. This is betrayal." She turned away, crossing her arms tighter as if to defend herself. Her shoulders tensed, but her voice remained cold. "You don't understand," she said, looking out the window. "You're not even trying. How long have we been living as neighbors? Year? Two? You come home from work, remain silent, eat, sleep. I'm furniture for you, Alex. And there I am alive." These words hit him like a slap in the face. He opened his mouth to answer, but stopped. Something in her tone, not regret, not a request, but indifference made him freeze. She didn't make excuses. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She simply stated the fact as if it were natural. Alive, he repeated quietly, almost in a whisper. Does that mean I'm dead? She didn't answer. She just stood there, looking to the side, her profile clear against the morning light. Alex looked at the woman he had known for 7 years, with whom he shared a house, a bed, a life, and he didn't recognize her. This was not Lauren, whom he had met in a bar at 31, with whom he had danced at a wedding to cheap music, with whom he had argued over the paint color of the living room. It was a strange woman, cold and distant, like the winter sky. He turned away and walked into the hallway. The suitcase was already their old, shabby, the same one with which he went on business trips. He assembled it at night while she was sleeping, throwing inside only the essentials: a pair of jeans, a t-shirt, a jacket, a razor. Nothing extra. Nothing that would bind him to this house more than necessary. Lauren followed him out and stood in the kitchen doorway. Her eyes finally met his, but there were no tears in them, no panic, just a mild surprise. "Are you leaving?" she asked, and a hint of mockery flashed in her voice. "Is it that simple?" He took the suitcase in his hand and straightened up. His face was stony, but inside everything was burning shock, pain, rage, mixed into one tight knot. "You are free," he said, looking into her eyes. "Me too." She blinked and opened her mouth, but said nothing. He turned, opened the door, and went out. The cold April air hit his face, but he didn't even notice. Footsteps echoed down the path as he walked toward the pickup truck. The suitcase went into the back with a thud, and the keys jingled in my hand. He got behind the wheel, started the engine, but didn't move right away. He just sat there, looking at their house, which was now just a building, alien and empty. Lauren didn't follow him. She didn't scream or rush to the car. The door remained closed, the curtains motionless. He was waiting for this, without knowing why, some sign, some reaction. But she was not there, and this finally finished him off. He drove out of the yard without looking back. The road ahead was as empty as his thoughts. The shock still held him in a vice, sharp, like a shard of glass in his chest. The pain came in waves, then receding, then coming again when he remembered her cold look, her words. "I'm alive there." The betrayal was not only in what she did, but also in how easily she accepted it, as if he didn't mean anything. It was as if 7 years had disappeared in this morning conversation, leaving behind only ashes. He was driving without knowing where. Hotel? A friend's apartment? Just a road? It didn't matter. For the first time in a long time, he was free, not the way he wanted, not the way he imagined, but free. And this freedom was heavy, like a suitcase in the back, like a video on a phone, like a memory of what he had lost. The road led him to a motel on the outskirts of town, a cheap one, with a neon sign where the letter M blinked like a black eye. Alex parked the pickup at the entrance, took his suitcase, and went inside. The lobby smelled of dampness and old carpet. A guy in his 20s sat behind the counter, his head glued to his phone. He looked up, nodded lazily, and handed over the key to room 12. No questions, no formalities, $20 a night, that's all. The room was cramped. A bed with a sagging mattress, a TV with a cracked screen, a table with coffee stains. Alex threw his suitcase on the floor, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the wall. The wallpaper was yellow, with a faded diamond pattern, and was peeling off in places in the corners. He sat there for 10 minutes, maybe more, until he realized that the silence here was worse than at home. At least the clock was ticking. There is nothing here, just the faint hum of the air conditioner outside the window. He took out his phone, opened his contacts, scrolled to the name of the lawyer, an old acquaintance from work, Tom, who once helped him with a speeding ticket. I dialed the number without thinking. Tom answered after the third ring, his voice hoarse but cheerful. "Alex? Damn, how many years? What happened?" "I need a divorce," he said without preamble. "Fast. Can you help?" Tom was silent for a second, then cleared his throat. "Seriously? Okay, come tomorrow at 9. Let's discuss. Thank you, Alex replied and hung up. He leaned back on the bed and closed his eyes, but sleep did not come. Instead, images flashed before my eyes. Lauren at that house, her cold look in the morning, her words, "I'm alive there." He clenched his fists, feeling his nails digging into his palms again, but the pain was weak, dull, like an old knife. The next morning, he was in Tom's office by 8:50. The building was old, with worn brick and a Jenkins and Associates sign above the entrance. Tom met him in a cramped room with a wooden table and stacks of papers. He was in his late 50s, balding, with bushy eyebrows and a habit of tapping his pen on the table. "Tell me," he said, leaning back in his chair, "what's going on with you and Lauren?" Alex sat down opposite him and put his hands on his knees. He didn't want to go into detail. There was no point in dumping it all in front of Tom like garbage from an overflowing bin. But he told the main thing, about her betrayal, about the video, about how she didn't even try to justify herself. "I want to finish this," he said, looking at the table. "No arguing, no sharing of spoons and forks. Everything is equal, period." Tom nodded and wrote something down on a notepad. "Fine. Do you have children?" "No." "Mortgage, joint business. The house has a mortgage, but I refuse it. Let him take it. We divide the rest cars, bills in half." Tom raised his eyebrows, but didn't say anything. He was used to clients who clung to every cent and fought over sofas and coffee machines. Alex was different. He didn't need trophies. He needed to get out of this cleanly, like leaving the cab of a truck after a long shift. "Okay," said Tom. "If she doesn't object, we can do this in a week. The state allows quick divorces if there are no disputes. I'll prepare the papers by tomorrow." Alex nodded. He signed a couple of forms, left a deposit, and left. It was cool outside. The sky was overcast with gray clouds, as if nature was adapting to his mood. He got into the pickup truck, but didn't start the engine. I just looked at the road, at the people walking past, rushing to work, carrying bags, talking on their phones. Ordinary life, and his life was different now. Lauren called the next day as he sat in the diner across the street from the motel, finishing his bacon and eggs. Her number flashed on the screen, and he froze, his fork stopping halfway to his mouth. He didn't want to answer, but something inside him, a habit, maybe, or remnants of something old, made him click accept. "Alex," she said without greeting. The voice was smooth and businesslike. "Tom called me. Have you filed for divorce?" "Yes," he answered, putting down his fork. "Today you will have the papers." She fell silent. He could hear her breathing, a faint noise in the background, maybe the TV, maybe the coffee maker. Then she spoke again, quieter, but with a hint of tension. "Are you serious?" Just like that, without talking. "We talked," he said. "In the morning, in the kitchen. You said everything." "That's not what I meant," she said, anger flashing in her voice. "You just walked away like I didn't matter. We could." "What?" he interrupted. "Fix it? After what I saw?" "No, Lauren, it can't be fixed." She was silent again, longer. Then she exhaled as if she had given up. "Fine. Do as you please. But one condition, don't make it public. Don't tell everyone about." "Well, you get the idea. I don't need anyone talking about it." Alex almost laughed, but the laughter got stuck in his throat. She wasn't worried about losing him, but what people would say. Kate, colleagues, neighbor with a perfect lawn across the street. It was so in her style to take care of the facade, even when everything inside had already collapsed. "I won't," he said. "I don't need it." She muttered something, either "thank you" or just a sound, and hung up. Alex looked at the cold, scrambled eggs and the greasy spots on the plate. He didn't care what she thought. He didn't care what anyone else thought. He wanted only one thing: for this to end. The divorce went quickly, as Tom promised. 6 days from filing documents to being stamped in court. Lauren signed everything without arguing, without calls, without meetings. They communicated through lawyers, short notes, and formal letters. She took the house a cottage, which he built with his own hands, painted, repaired. Let him choke, he thought. He didn't need this monument to their past. They divided the cars. He took a pickup truck, she took a sedan. The bills were cut in half like a birthday cake, but no one was celebrating. By the end of the week, he received the papers officially a free man. He felt no relief. There was no fanfare, there was no joy. Only emptiness, heavy and viscous, like oil in an old engine. He sat in the motel, looking at the document where his name was next to hers, crossed out by a single black line. 7 years, and this is what remains: paper, signature, stamp. But there was something else. A feeling that grew in him every day, with every word she said, with every look she looked at. She hasn't needed him for a long time. Not when she went to Mark. Not when she was lying about Kate. And much earlier, maybe a year ago, maybe two. When she stopped looking at him the way she used to. When her smiles became less frequent. When their conversations turned into exchanges of phrases about the weather and bills. He didn't notice it because he didn't want to. Because I'm used to routine, to stability, to the idea that she will always be there. But she left not that evening, not to that house, but a long time ago, unnoticed, leaving him alone in their common life. He put the papers in his suitcase and closed it. He got up, put on his jacket, and took the keys. He no longer needed the motel. He didn't know where he would go. Maybe he'd rent an apartment, maybe he'd leave the city. But he knew one thing: there was no turning back. She wanted freedom, she got it, and so did he. The road into the Tennessee mountains stretched like a long gray ribbon, winding between hills covered with dense forest. Alex drove in silence. The windows of the pickup truck were slightly open, and the cool April wind rushed inside, smelling of pine trees and wet earth. He didn't turn on the radio. The noise of the engine and the rustle of tires on the asphalt were the only sounds he wanted to hear. After the motel, after the trial, after everything that was left behind, he needed silence. The real one, and not the one that had been pressing on him in recent weeks. He didn't plan to come here. The decision came naturally as he sat in the cab of a pickup truck with divorce papers in the passenger seat. Apartment in the city, too close to the past. Friends, they would have asked, listened, patted him on the shoulder, but he didn't want any questions or sympathy. Then he remembered his parents' house, old, wooden, lost in the mountains, an hour's drive from the nearest town. His father died 5 years ago, his mother 2 years later, and since then the house has stood empty. Alex had been there a couple of times to check the roof and clear snow from the driveway, but he had no intention of living there. Still, the road became narrower, the asphalt gave way to gravel, and the pickup truck bounced on the bumps. A familiar turn appeared ahead, overgrown with blackberry bushes, with a lopsided sign, Green Ridge. He turned, and 10 minutes later the house appeared in front of him. 2-story, with logs darkened by time, a roof covered with moss, and a veranda where an old hammock, faded to pale green, still hung. The chimney stuck out crookedly, as always, and the windows looked at him with dark, empty eyes. Alex turned off the engine and got out of the car. The air was cold, clean, with a slight taste of wood smoke somewhere in the distance. A stove was being lit. He took a deep breath, and for the first time in weeks his chest didn't feel tight. The suitcase remained in the back. He was in no hurry to pick it up. Instead, he went to the door and took out the key from under the clay pot on the porch. His mother always left it there, in case of guests. The lock clicked with a crunch, the door creaked, and he stepped inside. The smell hit immediately: wood, old books, dust mixed with something elusively familiar. It was the smell of childhood, summer holidays, when he and his father repaired the boat by the stream, the smell of his mother's apple pies, the smell of leather bindings that his father collected on the shelves in the living room. The house was empty, but alive. Every crack in the floor, every creaking of the steps spoke of a past that he had almost forgotten. He walked into the living room. The furniture was where it had been left: a sofa with worn upholstery, a rocking chair by the fireplace, a coffee table with his initials carved into it. He's still boyish, crooked Adge. The fireplace was cold. There was a pile of ash in it, and on the shelf above it there was a framed photograph of him, about 10 years old, fishing with his father, both smiling, holding fishing rods. His mother was filming. He remembered her laughter when the fish fell off the hook. Alex ran his finger across the glass, leaving a trail in the dust. The kitchen was further away small, with wooden cabinets and an old gas stove. On the table lay a tablecloth, yellowed with age, with coffee stains that had never been washed off. He opened the refrigerator empty, only a faint smell of plastic. The electricity was working. The lights came on with a slight crack as he flicked the switch. The house was abandoned, but not dead. He was waiting for him. Alex went up to the second floor. The stairs creaked under his boots. The railings were smooth from time to time. His old room remained almost untouched. A bed with a blue blanket, a desk on which he once drew maps of imaginary countries, a shelf with books, Treasure Island, Tom Sawyer, a couple of tattered comics. The window looked out onto the mountains dark green, with patches of fog clinging to the peaks. He opened it, letting in the cold air, and breathed in again. It was easier to breathe here. He went downstairs, brought a suitcase, and threw it by the sofa. Then he walked to the fireplace, took out old newspapers and firewood from the box under the stairs dry, neatly folded, just as his father always left it. He lit the fire, slowly, without rushing. The flame crackled and warmth began to spread throughout the room, dispersing the dampness. He sat down in the rocking chair, stretched out his legs, and stared at the fire. The silence of the mountains embraced him, soft but deep like this forest. He didn't think about Lauren that evening. For the first time in weeks, her image did not pop up before my eyes, not her cold gaze, not her voice, not that video. Here, in this house, she seemed distant, alien, like a person from another life. He thought about the past, not about her, but about himself. About the boy who ran through these mountains, about the parents who built this house with their own hands, about who he was before her. Night fell quietly. An owl hooted outside the window, the wind rustled in the branches. Alex lay down on the sofa, covering himself with an old blanket that smelled of lavender, his mother's trace. Sleep came quickly, deep and calm, without dreams. For the first time he slept without clenching his fists. The morning woke him with sunlight streaming through the cracks in the curtains. He stood up and stretched, feeling his muscles ache from sitting in the car for a long time and the uncomfortable position on the sofa. In the kitchen I found a can of coffee in the cupboard, old, but still good. I brewed it in a tin mug on the stove and went out onto the veranda. The air was fresh, with the taste of dew. The mountains stood before him, silent and eternal, like guardians. He drank coffee, looking at them, and felt something inside begin to come to life. Not immediately, not abruptly, but slowly, like a sprout underground. This was not the end of the pain. It was still sitting in him, dulled, but alive. It was the start of something else. Here, in this house, smelling of wood and old books, he began to breathe again. Not completely, not yet, but enough to live. The day passed simply. He removed dust from the shelves, wiped the windows, and swept the floor. He did it slowly, with some strange pleasure from every movement. In the barn behind the house, I found an axe and chopped firewood. My father's old tool lay comfortably in his hand, like an extension of himself. Blow after blow, the wood cracked, sweat appeared on his forehead, and with each log he felt a little lighter. In the evening, he sat on the veranda with another mug of coffee, watching the sun set behind the mountains, turning the sky crimson and gold. The house creaked behind him, settling down at night like an old dog. There was no trace of her here, not her perfume, not her voice, not her lies. There was only him, this house, and the mountains. And this, for the first time in a long time, was enough. The morning in the mountains began quietly. Alex woke up to the sound of drops knocking on the roof. It had rained during the night, leaving behind a damp sheen on the trees and a light fog over the hills. He went out onto the veranda with a mug of coffee, breathed in the damp air, and decided that the day would be simple. No plans, no calls. Just him, the house, and the mountains. But by noon the sky cleared, the sun broke through the clouds, and he was drawn to the lake, a small one, half an hour's walk from the house, where he had fished with his father as a boy. He took an old fishing rod from the barn, a bamboo one with a worn handle that his father had repaired with tape 20 years ago, and walked down the path. The forest was thick, smelled of pine trees and wet earth. The branches crunched under the boots. The lake opened unexpectedly, a mirror of water surrounded by reeds with a reflection of mountains on the surface. There was a trailer near the shore, old, white, with peeling paint and a couple of plastic chairs at the entrance. Alex had seen it before, but never paid attention, thought it was abandoned. Today, there was a girl sitting on the steps. She was wearing a denim jacket, worn pants, and holding a mug. Dark hair fell onto her shoulders, slightly tousled by the wind, and her eyes were fixed on the water. Alex stopped, not knowing whether to go further or turn back. But she noticed him first, raised her head, and their eyes met. Her face was simple, not bright, but there was something catching about it, maybe a slight shadow of fatigue under her eyes, or the way she squinted slightly, as if assessing him. "Good afternoon," he said, so as not to remain silent. The voice sounded louder than he intended, the echo bounced off the water. She nodded, took her time answering, and took a sip from her mug. "Good afternoon," she finally said. Her voice was low, with a slight crack, like that of a person who talks to himself a lot. "Are you going fishing?" He raised the fishing rod to show. "I'll try. I haven't picked it up for a long time." She chuckled, the corner of her lips twitching into a half smile. "There are perches here, small but stubborn. The main thing is not to be scared off." Alex stepped closer and stopped at the shore, a couple of meters from the trailer. She didn't object, she just watched him unwind the line. He felt her gaze, but did not turn around. Something about her presence was calm, unobtrusive, like the shadow of a tree on a hot day. "Are you local?" he asked, casting his fishing rod. The float splashed into the water, circles spread across the surface. "No," she answered, putting the mug on the step nearby. "I come here sometimes, tired of the city. And you?" "I'm from this house." He nodded towards the mountains. "Parental. I haven't been for a long time." She looked where he pointed, then back at him. "Dusty, I guess?" "There are a few," he said, grinning. "But dear." "That's the main thing," she shrugged. "You can wipe off the dust." Silence hung between them, but not heavy, but light, like the wind over a lake. The float swayed on the water. The fish didn't bite, but he didn't care. He squatted down by the shore and put his fishing rod next to him. "My name is Alex," he said, looking at the water. "Melissa," she answered. "Maybe Mel." "It's a pleasure, Mel," he nodded. "Is the coffee fresh?" She picked up the mug and looked at it as if she had forgotten that she was holding it. "It's already cooled down." But in the morning there was nothing. "Do you want me to brew it?" "I won't refuse," he said, and she stood up, disappearing into the trailer. A couple of minutes later, she returned with another mug, a simple metal one with a slight dent on the side. "I don't have sugar," she warned, handing him the coffee. "Only black." "That's how I drink." He took the mug, their fingers slightly touching. Her skin was cold from the morning air. She sat back on the steps. He remained by the water, but turned to her. The coffee was strong, with a slight bitterness, just the way he liked it. "The weather is strange today," he said to continue the conversation. "It rained at night, fog in the morning, and now it's sunny." "Mountains are like that," she answered. "You never know what to expect. I like it. Everything in the city is too predictable." "That's for sure." He took a sip of coffee, looking at her. "It's like being in a cage in the city. Everything is on time." "And here?" she asked, narrowing her eyes. "You can breathe here," he said, and it came out on its own, without filters. She looked at him more carefully, but did not question him. "Yes," she said simply, "the air is different here. Clean." They fell silent again, but the silence was not oppressive. He looked at the lake, and so did she, and there was something in common, as if they were both looking for answers in the water. The float twitched, but Alex did not react. "The fish is gone." "No luck today," she noted. "Nothing," he shrugged. "I didn't come for fish." "And for what?" she asked, and a hint of curiosity flashed in her voice. He thought about it. Why is he here? Tell the truth about Lauren, about the divorce, about the emptiness. But instead, he answered more simply. Behind silence, probably. She nodded as if she understood. "The silence here is good," she said. "Not empty, alive." Do you come here often? He asked, changing the conversation. When I can, she answered. I work in Nashville in a bar. The schedule is flexible. I take days off and go away. This trailer is my piece of freedom. Bar, he repeated. Waitress. The bartender, she corrected with a slight smile. I pour it, listen, and sometimes chase away drunks. Normal work. Interesting, he said. I drive trucks. Or drove. I haven't decided what's next yet. Why did you quit? She asked, and her voice was soft, without pressure. He looked at her. Her eyes were honest, dark brown, with small wrinkles at the corners not from age, but from life. He could have lied, but he didn't. Life has changed, he said. A break was needed. She nodded again and didn't go any further. It happens, she said. Sometimes you have to stop to understand where to go. And you? He asked. What draws you here? She fell silent, looking at the water. Then she spoke, slowly, as if searching for words. I'm tired of the noise, she said. It's the same thing every day at the bar. People drink, complain, yell. At home, there is a neighbor upstairs with a drill and a dog barking downstairs. And it's quiet here, and no one expects anything from me. I understand, he said. It's as if time moves slower here. Exactly, she smiled wider. You run in the city, but here you sit and watch the clouds float by. And you have nothing to lose. He nodded and took a sip of coffee. The conversation flowed easily, without tension, like a stream between stones. They talked about little things, how the fish move deeper after the rain, how it is colder in the mountains in the spring than it seems, how the trailer creaks in the wind. But gradually the words became deeper. Do you live alone? She asked when the sun had already risen higher. Now, yes, he replied. I used to be with my wife, recently divorced. She looked at him, not with pity, but with understanding. It's probably difficult, she said. Yes, he admitted, but it's better than pretending. That's for sure, she said. I was married too. 3 years. Then I realized that he didn't see me. I left and don't regret it. How long has it been? He asked. 5 years, she answered. Alone since then. It's calmer this way. Isn't it lonely? He looked at her. It happens, she said, and her voice trembled, but her eyes remained clear. But it's better to be alone than with someone who doesn't hear you. He nodded. These words touched something inside, not painfully, but quietly, like a reminder. Lauren didn't hear him either. Maybe he is hers too. But here, by the lake, it seemed far away. And you? She asked. What after the divorce? I don't know yet, he said. I came here to think. Maybe I'll stay. Maybe I'll move on. Mountains are a good place for thoughts, she said. They don't put pressure, but they hold. Yes, he agreed. It's easier to breathe here. They fell silent, looking at the water. The sun rose higher, the lake shone like glass. Melissa stood up and stretched. I'll go make some more coffee, she said. Will you stay? I'll stay, he answered, and she went into the trailer, leaving him with a fishing rod and thoughts. The conversation was simple, but there was something real in it. Her voice was broken, her honest eyes, they did not promise anything, but they gave peace. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like a stranger. The day at the lake didn't end with just one conversation. After Melissa made more coffee, Alex didn't leave. He remained sitting by the water, watching the float bob lazily on the waves, while she pottered around in the trailer, humming something to herself, an old song about the road and the sunset that he vaguely remembered. Her voice, with a slight crack, intertwined with the sound of the wind, and it was strangely cozy. When she came out with 2 steaming mugs, he was not even surprised that he accepted her offer without hesitation. Here, she said, handing him the coffee. This time it's hot. Thank you. He took the mug and inhaled the bitter aroma. Do you always greet guests like this? Only those who don't persecute, she answered, sitting down on the steps. But you don't drive. He grinned and took a sip. The coffee burned my tongue, but it was pleasant something alive, real after weeks of emptiness. They sat like that for another hour, chatting about little things. about how she once caught a palm-sized perch and released it, about how, as a child, he almost sank his father's boat while trying to steer. The conversation was light, like the wind over a lake, but every time she laughed briefly, sincerely he felt something inside him thaw. "You're hungry, I guess?" she asked as the sun began to set. "There is a little," he admitted, "but I didn't think about it." "Wait," she said and disappeared back into the trailer. Half an hour later, she came out with a bowl of soup thick, with potatoes and carrots, smelling of herbs. Nothing special, but satisfying. He took a bowl, a spoon, and tried it. The soup was hot, simple, but tasty homemade, like my mother when she was a child. He ate slowly, feeling the warmth spreading through his body, and she sat next to him, looking at the lake, and was silent. This silence was their common one, not awkward, but warm, like soup in your hands. "Where did you learn this?" he asked, finishing the last spoonful. "At Grandma's," she answered. "She said that soup is a cure for everything, even out of sadness." "It works," he said, and she smiled, looking sideways at him. "I'm glad," she answered simply. The next day he came again. He didn't plan it, but his feet themselves led him to the lake. Melissa was there, sitting on a chair with a book in her hands, an old one, with a tattered binding. She raised her eyes and saw him, and the corner of her lips twitched. "Fishing again?" she asked, putting the book down. "Maybe," he said, raising the fishing rod. "Or maybe I'll just sit." "Sit," she said. "There is still coffee." Thus began their strange, unnamed time together. He came in the morning or afternoon, sometimes with a fishing rod, sometimes just like that. She made coffee, served soup, told stories from her life about a bar in Nashville, about a drunk client who once tried to serenade her, about how she bought this trailer for half price from an old man who was moving to Florida. Her voice was alive, cracked like old vinyl, and he listened to her without rushing, without interrupting. One day, he brought firewood from home dry, chopped the day before. She watched him stack them by the trailer and said, "Let's light a fire in the evening. I haven't sat by the fire for a long time." "We agreed," he replied, and that same day, when the sun set, they sat by the lake, watching the flames crackle, devouring the logs. He had been chopping wood before, while she was cooking something on the small stove in the trailer. The axe in his hands moved smoothly, with force, each blow reverberated in his shoulders, but it was pleasant work that did not require thoughts. Melissa came out when he was finishing, and suddenly laughed loudly, heartily. "What?" he asked, lowering the axe. "You're like a woodcutter from a fairy tale," she said, wiping the corner of her eye. "Only the beard is missing." He chuckled and wiped the sweat from his forehead. "I'll grow a beard if you tell me." "No need," she replied, still laughing. And so good. That laughter stayed with him. He was simple, real, and there was nothing in him of the cold emptiness that he knew with Lauren. Melissa was different down to the last detail, in her disheveled hair, in her shabby jacket, in the way she threw branches into the fire without fear of getting her hands dirty. She didn't play, she didn't pretend, and it bothered him more than he wanted to admit. They sat by the fire, night fell on the mountains. The stars appeared in the dark sky like shards of glass. She moved closer to the fire, stretching out her hands to the warmth. "Like?" she asked, looking at the fire. "Yes," he said. "I haven't sat like this for a long time." "Me too," she admitted. "You can't light a fire in the city. But here it's another matter." "Everything is different here," he said, and she looked at him, her eyes sparkling in the light of the flame. "You're coming to life," she said quietly. "I see it in you." He froze, not knowing what to answer. But she was right. Every day here with her, he felt the taste for life returning slowly, drop by drop, like water in a dry stream. It was in the coffee she brewed, in the soup she prepared, in her laughter when he awkwardly threw the fishing rod and the line got tangled. It was in the night by the fire, in the warmth that came not only from the fire, but also from her presence. "Maybe so," he said finally. "And you?" "I?" She shrugged. "I just live, as best I can." "You're good at it," he said, and she smiled, but did not answer. They sat for a long time, The fire crackled, the smoke rose to the stars. She told how she once burned an old frying pan while trying to fry fish, and he told how he fell into a lake as a child while chasing a frog. They laughed, talked, were silent, and the night flowed around them like a river. Melissa seemed real until the last crack in her voice, until the last look of her honest eyes. And with her, he began to feel alive again. The lake became more than just a fishing spot for Alex. Every morning he woke up with thoughts of the trail leading down, the water glistening in the sun, and Melissa sitting on the steps of her trailer with a mug of coffee or a book in her hands. They did not agree to meet it happen by itself, naturally, like breathing. He came, she smiled, and the day began. That morning he went down to the lake with a toolbox. The day before, Melissa mentioned that her generator was acting up. The trailer was constantly left without power, and she did not want to spend money on a repairman. "I'll try to figure it out myself," she said then, shrugging her shoulders, but Alex saw how she winced, looking at the old car. He didn't offer help right away. He knew that she was one of those who was used to coping on her own. But in the morning, while the sun was still rising over the mountains, he decided that enough talk. She was sitting on a chair by the trailer when he appeared, holding a box in one hand and an old jacket in the other. Her eyes widened in surprise, but then narrowed in slight mockery. "Is this the cavalry arriving?" she asked, putting down the book, some kind of shabby detective story with a faded cover. "Cavalry with screwdrivers," he answered, putting the box on the ground. "Where is your generator?" She nodded toward the back of the trailer, where the old unit, covered in rust and dust, sat under a canopy. Alex whistled, looking at him. "This is not a generator, this is a museum exhibit." "Hey, he's still working," she objected, standing up and coming closer. "Well, sometimes. Sometimes it's not work," he said, opening the drawer and taking out a wrench. "Let's see what's wrong with him." Melissa crossed her arms as she watched him remove the cover of the generator. Her presence was warm, unobtrusive, like a ray of sunshine breaking through the branches. She didn't bother with advice, but asked questions simple but precise. "Is this wiring?" "What if it's tightened here?" he answered, explained, and soon they were working together. He was digging through the wires. She was holding a flashlight that she found in the trailer. "Where did you learn this?" she asked as he disconnected one of the cables, covered with a black coating. "Father's," he answered, without looking up from his work. He fixed everything from tractors to toasters. "I've been running around with a screwdriver since I was 10 years old. A useful skill," she said, and a smile flashed in her voice. "I only know how to change light bulbs." "The light bulbs are half the battle," he said, and they both laughed, briefly but sincerely. An hour later, the generator began to purr, not smoothly, but steadily. Alex wiped his hands with the rag she handed him and stepped back, looking at the car with satisfaction. "Well, here it is," he said. "Now he won't pass out. Although if I were you, I would think about something new." "There's no money yet," she answered, shrugging her shoulders. "But thank you. Seriously." "It's nothing," he said, but her gaze, warm, with a slight sparkle, made him feel that it was not a trifle. She looked at the sun, already setting, and clapped her hands. "Okay, hero of the day, he deserves a reward. Let's go, I have something." She led him to the trailer, opened the door, and he stepped inside. It was cramped inside, but cozy. A small table littered with books and notepads, a sofa with a blanket, a couple of shelves with dishes. There was a photograph on the wall. Melissa, younger, with long hair, laughing against the backdrop of some field. He didn't ask, but he noticed how she glanced briefly at the photo and looked away. "Sit down," she said, pointing to the sofa, and took out a bottle of wine from the cabinet. Red, with a simple label. "It's not a shadow, but you can drink it." "Grape?" he asked, sitting down and watching her pour wine into 2 glass goblets. "Yeah," she replied, handing him one. "A friend from the bar brought it back from some trip. He said it was for the soul. I'm not arguing." They clinked glasses. The glasses clinked quietly, almost intimately. The wine was tart, with a slight sourness, and it warmed him from the inside, as if it had melted something that had long frozen. Melissa sat across from him, cross-legged, her face soft in the light of the lamp hanging over the table. "Why are we drinking?" he asked, twirling the glass in his hand. "For working generators," she said, and they laughed again, louder than necessary. The laughter was light, like bubbles in wine, and he felt the warmth spreading through his chest, not only from the alcohol, but also from her presence, from her gaze, which was neither cold nor empty. They talked about everything and nothing, about how she once spilled wine on a new client at the bar, and he laughed instead of getting angry, about how he got stuck in the snow on the highway and waited for a tow truck for 3 hours. The stories were simple, but there was life in them, real, without filters. And each of her laughter, each of her gestures, the way she brushed her hair out of her face or poured him wine made this warmth stronger, more alive. "Are you always like this?" she asked suddenly when the bottle was half empty. "Which?" He looked at her, feeling how her words touched something inside. "Calm," she said, "but not empty. There's something in your eyes." "Story." He fell silent, looking into his glass. "Story." Yes, she was Lauren, betrayal, divorce. But here, with Melissa, it seemed distant, like someone else's life. "Maybe there is," he said finally, "but I'm in no hurry to tell you." "No need," she answered, smiling. "The main thing is that you are here." This here sounded different, not just a place, but a moment. And he felt a spark, not bright, not loud, but quiet, but real. It was in her gaze, in the way she leaned a little closer, in the way her fingers lingered on the glass. And he did not extinguish this spark. Night came unnoticed. They left the trailer when the wine was finished and sat by the lake, looking at the stars. The air was cool, but Melissa brought a blanket, threw it over her shoulders, and they sat next to each other, almost touching each other. The conversation died down, but the silence was theirs, lively, warm, full of what did not need to be said. "Beautiful," she said, looking at the sky. "Yes," he answered, but looked at her. Her profile in the moonlight was soft, real, and he suddenly realized that he wanted to be closer, not just next to her, but with her. He turned, she felt his movement, and looked at him. Their eyes met and time stood still. He leaned in slowly, giving her a chance to pull away, but she didn't pull away. Her lips were warm, soft, with a slight taste of wine. The kiss was not rushed, not greedy, but deep, as if they had both been waiting for this longer than they thought. They returned to the trailer without saying a word. The door closed behind them, and the night became theirs. Her hands were confident but gentle, his were strong but careful. They drew closer slowly, feeling each other, revealing what was hidden, not only bodies, but also souls. It was not just passion, but something more, the truth that they were both looking for without naming it. They fell asleep in the morning, entwined under a thin blanket, in a cramped trailer that smelled of wood and her shampoo. He held her, feeling the warmth of her skin, the rhythm of her breathing, and for the first time in a long time he did not dream about the past. Only darkness, soft and calm. Morning came with the sun breaking through the curtains. Alex opened his eyes first and looked at Melissa. She was sleeping, buried in his shoulder, her hair scattered across the pillow. He didn't move, afraid to disturb this moment. For the first time in months, maybe years, he felt like everything was right. Not perfect, not loud, but just right. She woke up half an hour later, stretched, and smiled when she saw him. "Good morning," she said, her voice hoarse with sleep. "Good," he answered, and they laughed quietly, as if they were sharing a secret. They got up, she made coffee, he helped her cut bread for toast. The morning was simple, but in this simplicity there was a beginning, not a promise, not an oath, but something living, like a sprout making its way through the ground. He looked at her disheveled hair, at her honest eyes, and knew that this was not the end of pain, but the beginning of life. New, the real one. The morning after the night in the trailer was soft, almost surreal. Alex woke up with a feeling he hadn't experienced in a long time, lightness, as if the heaviness of the last months had begun to dissolve. Melissa made coffee, humming to herself, her voice cracking and sounding comfortable in the cramped space of the trailer. They ate toast, spread jam from a jar she found in the cupboard, and laughed about how he spilled coffee on the table. It was simple, but real, and he felt the warmth of her presence settle in him, like dust on old books in his parents' house. By noon, he decided to go to the town, a small village 20 miles from the lake, where there was a store, a gas station, and a couple of cafes. He needed to buy food, firewood, maybe a couple of light bulbs for the house. Melissa stayed at the trailer and said she wanted to read and take a walk along the beach. He left, giving her a short, "See you later," and she nodded, smiling that warm, slightly crooked smile of hers. The road to the town was familiar narrow, winding between the hills, with rare cars passing towards them. He turned on the radio, picked up an old rock station, and Tom Petty's voice filled the cab of the pickup truck. This was the first morning when he didn't think about Lauren, didn't reply to her cold words or the footage of that video in his head. Instead, he thought about Melissa, the way she laughed, the way her fingers touched his arm, the way her eyes looked at him without judgment. It was new, and he allowed himself to believe it. Joe stood on Main Street, a squat building with a worn sign and a couple of old pickup trucks out front. Alex parked, took the cart, and went inside. Inside, there was a smell of coffee from the machine and slightly sour milk. The shelves were filled with canned goods, cereals, tools, everything you needed in the mountains. He threw a can of stew, a packet of rice, a couple of candles into the cart, moving slowly, without haste. There were two people standing at the cash register, men in work jackets, with rough hands and loud voices. One, older, with a gray beard, was holding a pack of cigarettes. The other, younger, with a tattoo on his neck, was chewing a toothpick. They spoke without lowering their voices, as if the entire store was their personal territory. Alex moved closer to pay, and their words began to make sense. "Melissa is at the lake again, they say," said the one with the beard, twirling cigarettes in his hands. "I saw its trailer yesterday." "This Melissa?" The young man chuckled, spitting the toothpick onto the floor. "Well, she doesn't change. Still the same business, I suppose." "What a business," the bearded man grinned, but there was something dirty and sticky in his voice. "She's resting now. But who knows? They don't give up old habits." "Exactly," the young man neighed, slapping himself on the knee. "I remember how she was spinning in Nashville. She sold her body, motherfucker. It was expensive, they say, but it was worth it." "It was worth it," the bearded man nodded, squinting. "I wonder how much she charges per night now, or just for the soul." They laughed, loudly, with a whistle, and Alex froze. His hand, clutching the can of stew, trembled, but he did not drop it. "Melissa." The name hit my head like a hammer on a nail. He stood 2 steps away from them, behind a rack of chips, and their voices cut the air like rusty knives. Sexual services, Nashville, business. Every word fell into him, heavy, dirty, leaving a trace. He forced himself to breathe. Maybe it's a different Melissa. The name is not rare. But the trailer by the lake, Nashville, too many coincidences. He stepped towards the cash register and put his purchases on the counter, trying not to look at the men. The cashier, an elderly woman with a tired face, punched the item, threw it into the bag, and muttered, "$23.50. He handed her the money, took the change, and left. But the words followed him like a shadow. He sat in the pickup truck for a minute, looking at the steering wheel. His fingers clenched the keys until the metal dug into his skin. Is Melissa a girl of easy virtue? Ex or not, it didn't fit in my head. She was real, her laugh, her hands, her eyes. Or was that also part of the game? He remembered the night in the trailer, her warmth, her kisses, and his stomach clenched. What if it's all a lie? Another lie like the one with Lauren, only different, dirtier. He started the engine, but did not go to the lake. Instead, I turned to a gas station, where there was an old machine with coffee and Wi-Fi. I took the phone and opened the browser. His hands were shaking, but he forced himself to concentrate. Sexual services, Nashville, Melissa. The request was rude, stupid, but he didn't know how else. Websites popped up one after another, flashy headlines, bright photos, promises of an unforgettable vacation. He flipped through a couple of pages, feeling nausea rising in his throat, and suddenly he saw her. The questionnaire was old, the date of the last update was 3 years ago. But the photo was hers. Melissa, younger, with long hair, wearing a black dress that showed off everything she needed. The smile is not the one he knew, but a forced, professional one. The name is Melissa Jane. Height, weight, description. Passionate, open, for those who appreciate the best. The price is $300 per hour. Reviews, incredible, knows her stuff, will come back again. He looked at it, and the world around him narrowed like a tunnel. The shock hit first sharp, cold, like water in the face. It was her. Not another Melissa, not a mistake. His Melissa, with whom he drank coffee, fixed the generator, laughing by the fire, who slept in his arms last night. Then the pain came dull, heavy, like a blow to the chest. He remembered her voice, her, "I just live as best I can," and now these words sounded different, dirty, false. And finally disgust for her, for himself, for the fact that he allowed himself to believe in her. He closed the phone and threw it on the seat. My head was buzzing, as if after a long journey without sleep. He didn't know what to do. Back to the trailer. Should I ask her? Or leave everything, like Lauren left. But he couldn't leave. He needed the truth, not from the dirty talk outside the store, not from the website, but from her. The road back to the lake was long, although it only lasted half an hour. He drove slowly, squeezing the steering wheel, replaying every minute with her in his head. Her laughter, was it real? Her touches, what did they mean? Everything that seemed warm was now covered with a layer of dirt, like rust on old metal. He parked at the trailhead, got out, and walked to the trailer. My legs were heavy, as if they were dragging chains. The day after Alex found Melissa's profile passed in a strange daze. He returned to his parents' house, threw the toolbox at the doorstep, and sat on the veranda, looking at the mountains. The sun was setting, turning the sky crimson and gold, but he did not notice the beauty. There was only one question in my head. Who is she? The Melissa he knew with her laugh, her warm hands, her honest eyes, or the one who looked from the phone screen, with a forced smile and a price tag of $300 for an hour. He didn't sleep at night, replaying every minute with her, every word, every look. Everything that seemed real now looked like a mask, and it was killing him. By morning, he had made his decision. He needed to see her, say everything to her face. Not to argue or listen to excuses, he didn't want to hear them. He needed to put an end to it, to pull out this new pain by the roots, like a weed from the ground. He didn't take coffee, didn't shave, he just put on his jacket and boots and went to the lake. The path was damp from the night's fog, branches clung to his sleeves, but he didn't notice. His steps were heavy, even like hammer blows. She was at the trailer, sitting on the steps with a mug in her hands, looking out at the water. Her hair was pulled back into a loose ponytail, and her denim jacket hung over the back of a chair nearby. Hearing his steps, she raised her head, and her eyes, the same ones that he considered honest, met his. She didn't smile, didn't get up, just watched, as if she knew he was coming. "Alex," she said quietly, putting the mug on the step. There was no surprise in her voice, only fatigue. He stopped 5 steps from her and straightened up. His face was cold, like ice on a lake in winter. His eyes were dark and motionless. He didn't feel angry. Anger would have been simpler, purer. It was pain, deep and sharp, mixed with disgust that he could not shake off. "I thought you were different," he said, and his voice was low, hard, like metal. "I thought you were real. But you are just like her. She was just playing a role." Melissa blinked, her lips twitching, but she didn't look away. She stood up slowly and stepped towards him, but he raised his hand, stopping her. "Don't come closer," he said sharply. "I don't sleep with dirty girls." The words fell between them, heavy as stones. Her face turned pale, her eyes widened, but she did not scream or rush at him. She just stood there, looking at him, and there was something in her silence that cut him even more. "You don't know anything about me," she said finally, and her voice trembled but remained level. "Did you see the sight, hear the gossip, and decide that's it?" "I know enough," he snapped, not allowing her to continue. "You were selling yourself. Lies, pretense, everything I hate. You're just like Lauren, only worse because I believed you." She clenched her fists, her shoulders tense, but she didn't shout back. Instead, she spoke slowly, as if each word was difficult for her. I didn't lie to you, Alex. Yes, it happened in my life. I'm not proud of it, but I'm not hiding. I told you who I am now. You yourself decided that this was not enough. Phew, he stepped closer. His voice became louder, but still cold. You slept with me, Melissa. You laughed with me, sat by the fire, and I didn't even know with whom. Do you think this is normal? Do you think I can just forget that you were a corrupt girl? She flinched as if struck, but did not retreat. Her eyes sparkled with tears that she tried to hold back, but her voice remained firm. I'm not who I was, she said, but you don't want to hear it. All you see is dirt, and I saw more in you than you think. More? He almost laughed, but the laugh stuck in his throat, dry and bitter. You saw me as a fool, another one who will fall for your eyes and your voice. But I'm not like that. I won't stay with someone who lies to my face. I didn't lie, she repeated, and her voice broke. I didn't ask you to love me, Alex. I was just being myself. If this is not enough, then leave. He looked at her face, at the tears that were now rolling down her cheeks, at her hands clenched into fists. She didn't make excuses, didn't beg, didn't rush to him. She stood, open, wounded, but not broken, and this only increased his pain. He wanted to scream, wanted to break something, but instead he turned away. You're right, he said quietly, but every word was like a blow. This is not enough. He turned and walked away. His steps were heavy, his boots leaving deep footprints in the damp ground. He heard her son behind him, a short, muffled sound that he couldn't help but notice. But he didn't turn around. I couldn't. If he had seen her tears, her face, he would not have left, and he needed to leave. The path to the house was long, endless. He walked without feeling his legs, without feeling the wind that hit his face. For the first time, he did not leave because of anger. Anger would have been easier. It would have given him strength. It was pain, pure, deep, like a knife in the chest. He recoiled from her not because he hated her, but because he could not bear the truth. She was real to the last detail, to the last word, but this truth was dirty, and he did not know how to live with it. When he reached the house, the sun was already setting. He sat on the veranda, looking at the mountains, but did not see them. Melissa stood before my eyes, not the one from the site, but the one who was crying at the trailer. He left her there, alone, in tears, and this did not bring him any relief. Only emptiness, cold and heavy, like the ice that he himself brought into their short history. After leaving Melissa, Alex returned to the house, and the mountains, which had previously breathed in unison with him, now seemed like just huge stone masses, cold and indifferent. He closed the door, threw his jacket on a chair, and sat down on the sofa, staring at the empty fireplace. I didn't start a fire, I didn't have the strength, and I didn't have the desire either. Everything inside was frozen, like a lake in winter, covered with ice that couldn't be broken through. He felt like an idiot, not just deceived, but blind, naive, again falling into the same trap as with Lauren. Only now it was worse, because he allowed himself to believe, allowed himself to open up. The days passed slowly, grayly, like the fog that spread over the hills in the morning. He did not go out to the lake, did not take a fishing rod, did not go down the path. The house became his fortress or a prison, he himself did not know. He repaired the old table in the kitchen, which had been wobbly since childhood, cleaned the fireplace from ash, sorted through the books on the shelves, but all this was mechanical, without a soul. His hands moved, but his thoughts stood still, stuck in that moment at the trailer when he left Melissa in tears. Her face pale, with sparkling eyes, could not leave his mind, but he drove it away, replacing it with the cold, I don't sleep with dirty girls. These words became his shield, but the shield was heavy, and it did not protect from pain. He didn't answer calls. Tom, a lawyer, called once and left a message about some divorce papers, but Alex didn't call back. Friends from work wrote a couple of times, "Where did you go? Shall we meet at the bar?" But he left the messages unanswered. Even the old lady from the store in the town, where he went once a week to buy groceries, noticed his silence. "You've become kind of gloomy," she said, punching a can of beans, but he just nodded and left. He didn't want to see anyone, didn't want to talk. The world outside seemed alien and people potential liars, ready to stick a knife in the back. The only sound in the house was the creaking of the floorboards under his steps and the ticking of the old clock in the kitchen. He drank coffee, black and bitter, like his thoughts, and looked out the window, where the mountains were silent, giving no answers. He felt like a fool for believing in her laughter, in her warmth, in her, "I'm just living as best I can." It was all a game, and he was caught again, like a boy who can't see beyond his nose. Lauren lied to him for years, Melissa for days, but the result was the same. He was left alone, empty-handed, and broken trust. On the fifth day, the silence of the house was broken by a knock on the door. Alex was sitting on the veranda with a mug of cold coffee when he heard it sharp, insistent, not like the random sound of the wind or a bird. He frowned, put his mug on the railing, and walked towards the door. He didn't want to open it no matter who it was, he didn't care. But the knocking was repeated, louder, and a woman's voice shouted, "Hey, is anyone there? I know you're home. The pickup is parked." The voice was unfamiliar, with a slight southern accent, firm, as if its owner was not used to retreating. Alex froze at the door, but curiosity or fatigue from being alone made him turn the knob. On the threshold stood a woman of about 40, short, strong, with short dark hair and a face that had too many wrinkles for her age. She was wearing jeans and a leather jacket and holding a cigarette, the smoke from which rose into the cold air. Her eyes gray, Tenacious looked him over from head to toe, as if they were scanning him. "You're Alex, right?" she asked without saying hello. Her voice was hoarse, smoky, but confident. "Who are you?" he answered without opening the door any further. His tone was cold, almost hostile. "My name is Rita," she said, taking a drag on her cigarette and blowing the smoke to the side. "I'm from Nashville, worked with Melissa." The name hit him like a shot. He clenched his fist, but didn't move. "Melissa," she again. He wanted to slam the door, but Rita stepped forward, resting her hand on the frame. "Don't drive," she said quickly. "I didn't come here to get on your nerves. Give me 5 minutes, listen." "I have nothing to listen to," he snapped, looking into her eyes. "Everything I need to know, I already know." "You think you know," she said, narrowing her eyes, "but you only see the top. Let me tell you, then do whatever you want." He was silent, looking at her. Her face was hard, but not angry, and there was something about it that made him retreat. Not trust, but fatigue let him speak, as long as it goes away. "Okay," he said finally, stepping aside. 5 minutes. She nodded, put out her cigarette on the railing, and entered. The house greeted her with a creaking of floorboards and the smell of old wood. Alex pointed to the sofa, but remained standing, crossing his arms over his chest. Rita sat down, put her hands on her knees, and looked at him. "I worked with Melissa at the bar," she began, her voice smooth and matter-of-fact. "But not only there. We were in the same business. Sexual services for money. You already know that, right?" He nodded, clenching his jaw. The words "sexual services" cut like a knife, but he didn't look away. "She wasn't in it because she wanted to," Rita continued. "Her mother was sick with cancer, and she needed money for treatment. Melissa is not one to whine or beg, she just went ahead and did it. Signed a contract with one bitch Claire who keeps girls in Nashville. Do you think it's just a job? No, it's a cage. Melissa wanted to leave as soon as her mother died, but they kept her." Alex was silent, but something stirred inside, not pity, but a cold, heavy feeling. He didn't want to believe, didn't want to listen, but Rita's words fell into him like stones into water, leaving circles. "Did you hold it?" he asked, his voice low but firm. "What do you mean, kept?" "Contract," said Rita, looking into his eyes. "You sign, and then you won't leave until you work. Claire knows how to handle it. Melissa tried to escape. She worked in a bar, saved, but Claire did not let go. She said that she must work." He looked at her, feeling the words break through his walls, but he didn't want to show it. His face remained cold, motionless, like a mask. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked finally. "What's in it for you?" Rita shrugged her shoulders, took out a new cigarette, but didn't light it. She just twirled it in her hands. Because she was talking about you, she said. A week ago, when I called, she said she met someone in the mountains, that he is different. I don't know what you had, but she didn't lie to you. She's not who she was, and I don't want you to think that she's just a prostitute playing around. He turned away, looking out the window. The mountains stood silent, as always, but now their silence seemed deeper. Thank you, he said quietly, but without warmth. You said it. Now go away. Rita stood up and looked at him again with a long, appraising look. You're not an idiot, Alex, she said finally. Just wounded. Think what you want, but she's not Lauren. She left, slamming the door, leaving behind her the smell of cigarettes and the echo of her words. Alex stood in the middle of the room, feeling the walls press harder. He closed himself off from everyone, but the truth still found him, and now he didn't know what to do with her. The days after Rita's visit dragged on like an endless road in the fog. Alex sat in the house, surrounded by walls that he himself had built around himself not from wood, but from pain, mistrust, and a cold determination not to let anyone get close. Rita's words rang in my head like an echo in the mountains. She didn't lie to you. They kept her. She's not who she was. They cut him, but he did not want to accept them. It was easier for him to stay in his icy cocoon, where everything was clear. Melissa was a lie, like Lauren, like everything he believed in. But the longer he sat in silence, the more something inside him struggled, not loudly, not brightly, but quietly, like a sprout breaking through the asphalt. He couldn't get her out of his head. Not the Melissa from the website, with a forced smile and a price tag, but the one who laughed by the fire, who cooked him soup, who looked at him with honest eyes. Her tears at the trailer, her voice, I'm not who I was, returned to him again and again, and each time he drove them away, repeating to himself, I don't sleep with dirty girls. But Rita's words added cracks to this armor. What if she's right? What if he was wrong? What if he had closed himself off from the truth again, just as he had closed himself off from Lauren while she was ruining their lives? By the morning of the fourth day, he could not stand it. The struggle inside became unbearable, not a scream, but a dull, heavy pressure that he could no longer ignore. He got up, put on his jacket, took the keys to the pickup truck, and drove to the lake. He didn't know what he would say. He didn't know what he wanted: an explanation, forgiveness, an end. He just drove, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. The road was familiar, but now every turn seemed longer, every hill higher. He didn't turn on the radio, didn't open the window, just the noise of the engine and the pounding of his heart in his ears. The lake opened up before him, calm as a mirror, with mountains reflected in the water. The trailer was where it always was, white with peeling paint, but something was wrong. The silence was too thick, too empty. He parked, got out of the car, and his gaze immediately fell on the steps. They were empty. Not Melissa, not her mug, not the book she always left nearby. The trailer windows were dark, and the curtains were drawn. His stomach clenched, but he forced himself to come closer. The door was closed, but not locked. He knocked shortly, sharply, but there was no answer. Only silence, cold and dead. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. It was empty inside, not just quiet, but cleaned out. The sofa was neatly covered with a blanket. The table was empty. The cabinets were closed. No traces of her presence, no books, no clothes, no smell of coffee. Only on the table was a sheet of paper, folded in half, with his name written in black pen, Alex. He froze, looking at the letter. His hand trembled, but he took it and turned it around. The handwriting was hers, uneven, with a slight slant, as if she wrote quickly but diligently. He began to read, and every word fell into him like a stone into a deep well. Alex, I left. I don't know if you'll read this, but I have to write. You left, and I don't blame you. I saw your eyes, there was pain there, not anger. And I know why. You think I deceived you like your ex. But that's not true. I want you to know the truth, not so that you will come back, but so that you will understand. I got into this network 5 years ago. My mother was dying of cancer, and I could not save her. The treatment cost more than I could earn in a bar or anywhere. I was alone, I was 25, and I didn't know what to do. Then I met Claire. She promised money, quickly and a lot. I signed a contract for 2 years. I thought I'd work and leave. But that's not how it works. Claire held us all fines, debts, threats. If you leave early, she finds you and ruins your life. I tried to break free when my mother died, but she didn't let go. I worked in a bar, saved up, paid her so she could get behind. A year ago, I paid everything off. Gone. Purely. But the past is not erased, the profile remains, the gossip remains. I can't remove them. I didn't tell you because I was afraid. Not what you recognize, but how you look at me. I saw the way you look at the world, wounded but strong, and I didn't want to become another wound. You were the first person with whom I felt alive without pretending. Coffee, a fire, a night with you, it was real. I didn't play, but I knew that you would not accept the truth, and I turned out to be right. I left because I didn't want you to look at me the way you did that day at the trailer. You called me dirty, and I don't argue I was in the dirt, but I got out. If you can't see it, I won't force you. Live Alex. You deserve more than pain. Melissa. He finished reading, and the letter fell from his hands, falling on the table with a quiet rustle. He stood looking at the empty trailer and felt something inside him crumble. Not the walls he built, but something deeper, the confidence that he was right, that he was protecting himself. Her words were simple, without embellishment, without pleading. She didn't make excuses, didn't ask to come back. She explained who she was and left, leaving him with the truth. He walked out of the trailer and sat down on the steps where she had sat so many times. The lake was in front of him, calm, indifferent, but now it seemed empty without her. He remembered her laughter, her hands, her voice, and realized she was real. Not the one he wanted, not ideal, but real, with her scars, her past, her struggle. And he missed her. Not out of anger, like with Lauren, but out of fear, because he closed himself off without giving her a chance. The letter was inside, but he did not take it away. He got up, went to the pickup truck, and got behind the wheel. The engine started with a usual roar, but it did not move. I just sat there, looking at the trailer, at the lake, at the mountains, and felt the pain mixed with regret. He was caught again, not by a lie, but by his own blindness. And now she left, leaving him alone with this truth. The lake without Melissa became an empty place for Alex, just water, surrounded by mountains, without warmth, without her voice. He nevertheless took the letter left in the trailer, put it in his jacket pocket, and carried it with him as a reminder. I didn't reread it, every word was already etched in my memory, but I felt its weight, like a stone in my hand. He missed her, and this realization did not let go, gnawing at him from the inside, quietly but persistently. He couldn't just sit in the house, looking at the mountains, and pretend it was all over. He needed to find her. He started with what was at hand, a telephone. I sat down on the veranda, opened my browser, and entered her name, Melissa Jane. The old sex sites popped up first, with the same photos and reviews he'd seen before. He leafed through them, feeling his stomach tighten, but now it was not disgust, but something else, regret mixed with determination. The questionnaire had not been updated for 3 years, as she wrote, but it was a dead end. She left that life, and the traces on the internet were lost. Then he called Rita. I found the number in the list of recent calls. She called a couple of days ago, but he didn't answer. Now he typed it, sitting in the kitchen while the coffee cooled in the mug. She picked up after the second ring, her voice hoarse as always. "Alex," she said, and there was a hint of surprise in her tone. I didn't expect it. "Where is she?" he asked without preamble. His voice was smooth but firm. Rita was silent for a second, then cleared her throat. "Are you serious? After everything?" "Where is she, Rita?" he repeated without raising his voice, but there was steel in every word. She exhaled, and he heard her light a cigarette. "I don't know for sure," she said finally. "She called a couple of days ago and said she was leaving. I don't want to go back to Nashville. She said something about Clarksville, but that's all I know. She's not one to leave an address." "Clarksville," he repeated, clutching the phone. "Thank you." "Alex," she said before he hung up, "are you sure you need this?" He didn't answer. I just pressed end and stared at the wall. Clarksville is a small town in Tennessee, a couple of hours' drive from the mountains. Not Nashville, not a metropolis, but something simpler, quieter. It looked like her. He got ready quickly, threw a couple of t-shirts, a toothbrush, and a letter from the trailer into his backpack. The pickup started the first time, and he drove off without looking back at the house. The road was straight, the asphalt was shining after the morning fog, the radio was playing something old and unobtrusive. He made no plans, did not come up with speeches. He just drove, feeling how every kilometer brought him closer to something that he did not yet understand. In Clarksville, he started with bars and eateries, places where she could work. Rita said that Melissa left the network but remained at the bar, which means she was most likely looking for something familiar. He went into every hole on the main street, ordered coffee, asked the bartenders and waitresses, "Do you know Melissa?" Dark hair, cracked voice, new to work. Most shook their heads and shrugged their shoulders, but at a third place Roy's, with its worn linoleum and the smell of fried potatoes, an elderly waitress nodded. "Melissa?" she asked, wiping her hands on her apron. "There is one. New girl. Works in the morning, lives upstairs in the room. But today her shift is later, at 5 o'clock. He looked at his watch, it was 3. Wait 2 hours. He nodded, thanked him, ordered more coffee, and sat by the window, looking out onto the street. The town was quiet, with low houses and rare cars. People walked slowly, some with packages, some with children. This was not her place, too ordinary, too gray, but he understood why she was here. Hide, start over, away from Nashville, away from the mountains, away from him. At 5 he returned. The diner came to life, a couple of truckers at the counter, a family in the corner, the smell of coffee and burgers. And there she was, standing behind the counter, wearing a simple black apron, holding a tray. Her hair was shorter than he remembered, cut unevenly, as if she had picked up the scissors herself. She looked tired, but alive. She moved quickly, delivering plates, smiling at the customers with a short, familiar smile. His heart sank, but he did not move, just watched. She noticed him a minute later. Her gaze slid across the hall, stopped at him, and the tray in her hands trembled. She set it down on the counter, pursed her lips, but didn't look away. He stood up and approached her, slowly but confidently. The people around were noisy, but for him they were not there, only her face, her dark eyes, in which a shadow of fear flashed. "Alex," she said quietly, and her voice was the same, with a break, but without warmth. "What are you doing here?" He stopped a step away from her and looked into her eyes. He was not going to speak beautifully. He did not prepare speeches. "I just said what was inside, briefly and honestly." "I found your letter," he began, his voice low but firm. "I read it. Thought about you. And about myself. I was blind, Melissa. Not because of you, because of myself. If you want to start over, I'm here." She was silent, looking at him. Her hands clenched into fists, then unclenched. Her eyes sparkled, but there were no tears. She didn't believe him. He saw it in her tense shoulders, in her compressed lips. She expected a trick, a lie, as she had expected from others all her life. But he stood in front of her, open, without masks, and in his eyes there was only one thing: the truth. Not promises, not vows, but simple, brutal honesty. "Are you serious?" she asked finally, and her voice trembled. "After everything?" "Yes," he said. "I'm not lying." She looked away, looked at the counter, at the tray, then back at him. Her face softened, but not completely. A shadow of doubt remained. She didn't rush to him, didn't cry, didn't say yes. She simply nodded, briefly, as if she was making not a decision, but a fact. "I have to work," she said. "Shift until 9. "I'll wait," he answered, and that was all. He sat down at a table by the window, ordered coffee, which he did not drink, and watched her move around the hall. She didn't completely believe him, but she saw in his eyes that he wasn't lying. And that, for now, was enough. Melissa's shift ended at 9, just like she said. Alex was waiting for her at the table by the window, watching as she put away trays, wiped down the counter, counted the tips, change, and a couple of crumpled dollars, which she put in her apron pocket. He didn't rush her, didn't come closer, just sat there, feeling how time was passing slowly but surely. The coffee in front of him had cooled, and he took a couple sips just for show. The people in the diner were leaving. The truckers had left. The family had left, leaving crumbs on the table in their wake. Finally, the lights in the hall went out, and she walked out, taking off her apron as she walked. She stopped at the exit and looked at him. Her face was tired, her eyes were dark, but there was something alive, albeit cautious, in them. He stood up and walked over to her without saying a word. They walked out together, and the cold Clarksville air hit their faces, smelling of gasoline and wet asphalt. His pickup truck was parked by the side of the road, black and shabby as always. He opened the passenger door and nodded to her. "Sit down," he said quietly. She hesitated, but sat down. He walked around the car, got behind the wheel, started the engine, but didn't drive. He simply turned on the heater to drive away the cold and leaned back in his seat. The silence between them was thick, but not heavy, rather expectant, like before the first step. "Where are we going?" she asked finally, looking out the window, where the lights of the diner were going out one by one. "Nowhere," he answered. "Let's just sit." She nodded without arguing. Her hands lay on her knees, her fingers trembled slightly, not from the cold, but from something else. He noticed this, but did not ask. Instead, he looked at her profile, illuminated by the weak light of the lantern, at her short hair, which she kept tucking behind her ear. "Thank you for finding me," she said quietly, without turning around. "I didn't think you'd be looking." "I didn't think so either," he admitted, "but I couldn't help but look." She turned to him, her eyes meeting him. There was so much in them: fatigue, fear, hope, that he felt something shrink inside. He didn't know what to say, but she spoke first. "Why did you come back?" she asked, and her voice trembled. "After everything I told you, after you left," he thought, looking at the steering wheel. The answer was simple, but heavy, like a load in the back. "Because you were real," he said finally. "I didn't see it right away." He was blind. "But you didn't lie to me, Melissa, and I can't forget it." She pursed her lips and looked away. Her fingers clenched into a fist, then unclenched. The silence returned, but now it was different, deep, like a lake in the mountains. He waited, not rushing her. And finally she spoke again, slowly, as if she took every word out of her with effort. "I have always been considered a commodity," she said, and her voice was quiet but brittle, like glass before a crack. "Since childhood. My father left when I was 5, my mother drank until she got sick. I grew up thinking that no one needed me except what I could give. When she was dying, I went to Claire because it was the only way to save her. And there I became a thing. For all of them, the clients, Claire, even myself, they looked at me like I was meat, Alex. They paid, took, left, and I counted the money and thought that this was normal." She fell silent, her breathing becoming uneven. He looked at her, feeling her words falling into him, heavy, sharp. He wanted to say something, but she continued. "I tried to leave," she said, her voice breaking. "After Mom, I wanted to start over. But Claire held me with a contract, debts, threats. She said that I was worth nothing without her. That's all I can do." And I believed her. I believed for years, until she paid everything and ran away. But even then, people look at me and that's all they see. Dirt. A girl of easy virtue, even if you saw it. Tears flowed down her cheeks, quietly, without sobbing. She didn't wipe them, she just sat looking into the darkness outside the window. Alex felt a tightening in his chest, not pity, but something deeper, something he couldn't name. "I was wrong," he said, and his voice was low but firm. "I saw the dirt because I was afraid. After Lauren, I didn't trust anyone. But you're not a commodity, Melissa. I saw more in you. I see it now." She turned to him, her eyes shining with tears, but there was a shadow of surprise in them. She wiped away a tear with her sleeve and sniffed. "You're the first one to see," she said, and her voice became quieter, almost a whisper. "Everyone saw only the body, money, and services, even myself. And you looked at me as a person, even when he left." He nodded without looking away. Her words were true. He saw her, not the product, Not the past, but her. And that was what brought him here, to this car, on this night. I'm not perfect, he said. Fool, blind, stubborn, but I'm here, and I see you. She cried harder, now unable to hold back. Tears streamed down her face, she covered her mouth with her hand, but sobs broke through. He reached out his hand and touched her shoulder carefully, but confidently. She did not move away, but leaned towards him, resting her forehead on his chest. He hugged her, feeling her body shaking with sobs, and just held her without saying anything. Her tears soaked his shirt, but he did not move, only breathed in unison with her. I'm tired of being a thing, she whispered into his shoulder. So tired. You are not a thing, he said quietly but firmly. Never been. She raised her head and looked at him. Her face was wet, red from tears, but there was something new in her eyes, not fear, not doubt, but a weak, trembling light. She didn't answer, just nodded, and he realized that words were no longer needed. They sat there until the morning, in the pickup truck, the heater running, watching the sky slowly brighten over Clarksville. The conversation died down, but the silence was theirs, alive and warm. She cried, he listened, and somewhere between her tears and his silence they found each other. Not forever, not with promises, but just here and now. When the sun rose, she wiped her face with her sleeve and looked at him. What's next? She asked, and her voice was hoarse, but calm. I don't know, he said honestly, but I'm nearby. She nodded, and there was trust in her gaze, not complete, not blind, but real, and that was enough. Dawn in Clarksville found them in a pickup truck, carrying empty coffee mugs that Melissa had brought from the diner after her shift. They did not sleep, but they did not feel tired the night of conversations. Her tears and his silent support left them devastated, but alive. As the sun rose over the city, bathing the streets in a soft light, Alex looked at her. Shall we go back? He asked, his voice low but calm. She turned to him, her eyes still red from tears narrowed in slight surprise. In Tennessee? She clarified, squeezing the sleeve of her jacket. Yes, he said, to the mountains. House, lake. If you want. She was silent, looking out the window where Clarksville was waking up cars driving by, someone opening a store across the street. Then she nodded, briefly but firmly. I want to, she said. This is no place for me. He started the engine, and they drove off. The drive back was quiet, the radio wasn't on. The windows were cracked open, letting in the cool morning air. Melissa sat nearby, looking at the flashing trees. Her hands lay on her knees, no longer shaking. Alex didn't speak, but he felt her presence not as a shadow of the past, but as something new that he wanted to preserve. They stopped at a diner for her to pick up her things, an old backpack with a pair of jeans, a t-shirt, and the same tattered book he'd seen by the lake. She said goodbye to the owner, an elderly man with a thick mustache, who muttered something like, "Good luck," and waved his hand. An hour later, they were driving into the mountains, and Clarksville was left behind like a bad dream. When they got to the lake, the trailer was where she had left it, white, peeling, with empty steps. Melissa got out of the truck, looked at him, and her face softened, but there was a shadow in her eyes. I thought I wouldn't see him again, she said quietly. It's yours, Alex answered, unloading her backpack from the back. We'll fix it if you want. She nodded, and they started small. The generator still worked, but the wiring was old and the roof was leaking after the rains. Alex brought a toolbox from home, took out screwdrivers, a hammer, and a can of sealant. He fumbled through the wires, checking connections while Melissa stood nearby, handing him tools or holding a flashlight. Her hands were dexterous, although inexperienced, and she learned quickly within a day she was tightening the nuts herself and applying sealant to the cracks. You're doing a good job, he said one day, wiping sweat from his brow after they had finished fixing the window. I have a good teacher, she answered, and her lips twitched into a slight smile. He nodded, feeling the warmth of her words settle in his chest. In the afternoon, they moved to the garden near the house. It was abandoned, the grass was knee-deep, the blackberry bushes had grown, the old fence was rickety. Alex took a shovel and began digging the beds, while Melissa pulled up the weeds, putting them in a pile. Her movements were sharp but precise, as if she was throwing something out of herself. They worked in silence, but in this silence there was something in common, a rhythm that connected them. "What are we planting?" she asked, wiping the dirt from her hands on her jeans. "Potatoes, maybe," he said, "or tomatoes. Whatever you want." "Tomatoes," she decided. "I love their smell." "Then tomatoes," he agreed, and they continued, digging the ground for the future. At night, they sat around the fire, either by the trailer or on the veranda of the house. The fire crackled, the smoke rose to the stars, and they spoke. Not about the past, it lay between them like a shadow, but they did not touch it. They talked about the future in simple words, without grand plans. "I could stay here," she said one day, looking at the flames. "Work in a town, in a bar or store. I don't want to go back to Nashville." "Stay," he replied, throwing a branch into the fire. "There is a place." She looked at him, her eyes sparkling in the firelight. "I don't believe I deserve this," she said quietly. "You, this house, this silence. I've been the wrong person for too long." He shook his head, his face firm but soft. "You deserve it," he said. "I know." She pursed her lips and looked away, but did not object. Her fingers fiddled with the hem of her jacket, and he saw how she was struggling with herself, with disbelief, with a habit of considering herself unworthy. But he knew he was telling the truth. She persevered against Claire, against the past, against the filth in which she was kept. And now she was here with him, and it was right. They sat like that until midnight. The fire was dying out. The stars were hanging over the mountains. She didn't fully believe it, but his words, his presence slowly broke through her walls. He didn't rush her, didn't force her. Just being there, fixing the trailer, digging the garden, talking about the future. And every night, looking at her, he knew she deserved it. Or maybe he does too. Summer came to Tennessee quietly. Without fanfare, the sun became warmer. The mountains were covered with thick greenery, and the lake near the house reflected the sky like a mirror. Alex and Melissa settled into this rhythm. He fixed the trailer, she dug the beds, and their days passed slowly but fully. The trailer was now parked outside the house. In the garden where they had planted tomatoes, the red fruits were already beginning to fill with juice, and Melissa would sometimes pick one, smell it, and smile. They built a new porch, a simple one made of pine planks. With railings Alex cut himself, and an old hammock she hung up to swing in the evenings. One morning, while he was sawing wood at the barn, and she was watering the beds with an old watering can, the postman, an old man in a rusty pickup truck, drove up to the house. He rarely appeared, usually bringing bills or advertising, but this time he threw something small into the box and left, waving his hand. Alex finished with the wood, wiped his hands on his jeans, and went to check. There was a postcard in the box, a simple one, with a picture of a sunset over the mountains and a stamp from Nashville. On the back is Lauren's familiar handwriting, neat and slanted slightly to the right. He took the card, returned to the veranda, and sat down in the rocking chair. Melissa noticed him, put the watering can aside, and walked over, wiping her hands on her apron. "What's there?" she asked, looking at the paper in his hands. "From Lauren," he said, and his voice was even, without a trace of anger. She frowned but didn't say anything, just sat down on the step next to him, looking at him. He turned the card over and read aloud. "You still found someone worse. Good luck, Alex. Lauren." The words hung in the air, short, sharp, like a prick. Melissa pursed her lips, her eyes darkened, but she didn't look away. He looked at the card for another second, then smiled not bitterly, not evilly, but quietly, almost tenderly. "No," he said, looking at Melissa. "I found someone who knows the price of love." Her face trembled, her eyes sparkled, but she did not cry. She simply nodded, briefly, as if she accepted his words without arguing. He handed her the card, she took it, looked at it, then crumpled it in her fist and threw it towards the fireplace where they had burned branches last week. "She doesn't understand," she said quietly, and there was no resentment in her voice, only fatigue. "She doesn't need to," he answered, standing up. "This is not her life." He approached her and extended his hand. She took it, stood up, and they stood there, looking at the garden, at the trailer that was now theirs, at the tomato beds, at the new veranda that smelled of fresh wood. The sun rose higher, the shadows became shorter, and the mountains were silent, as always, but now their silence was warm. The camera would pull back slowly, showing them silhouetted against the backdrop of the veranda, him, tall and strong, and her, with short hair and a straight back. The trailer stood in the garden, white and shabby, but alive as part of their history. The lake sparkled in the distance, the mountains hugged the horizon, and all this was their world, simple, honest, real. They didn't speak anymore, they just stood there holding hands, and that was enough. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one.